It's one of those stories where you read the headline and your brain does that Windows 95 error noise. It's war, not trade war, not culture war, not the kind of war where two cable networks argue for 6 hours and then go to commercials. No, apparently we're talking about the kind of war where everyone suddenly starts saying the word constitutional like it's a weapon. Because somewhere between a courthouse, a secure phone line, and the group chat nobody was supposed to screenshot, Washington collectively lost its mind. Here's the setup, as it's being whispered, shouted, subtweeted, and aggressively podcasted. A federal judge, Judge Caldwell, makes a decision involving someone mysteriously referred to as Witness 14, which already sounds like a rejected character from a Saw movie. And this decision, depending on who you ask, is either a completely routine exercise of judicial discretion or the opening shot of the most dramatic showdown since someone unplugged the Senate coffee machine. According to the version of events racing around the internet at the speed of bad ideas, Witness 14 gets jailed. Suddenly, quietly, with paperwork so sealed it might as well be classified by the Avengers. And that's when Vance allegedly hears about it and allegedly reacts in a way that makes people reach for words like meltdown, eruption, and my personal favorite, exploded, which is a very strong verb for someone who remains, as far as we know, physically intact. Now, before anyone starts carving this into Mount Rushmore, let's slow down. Because every time a story includes phrases like leaked audio, sources say, and people familiar with the matter, what it usually means is, buckle up, reality is about to get stretched like a yoga instructor on Instagram. But that hasn't stopped everyone from treating this like the Super Bowl of constitutional crises. The claim is that there's audio, real audio, 37 seconds, not 36, not 38, 37, because nothing says credibility like an oddly specific number. And in this audio, Vance is supposedly not doing his calm, buttoned-up, I'm thinking very hard about Ohio voice. He's angry. He's animated. He's saying things that, if you imagine them being said out loud, make you picture aides slowly backing toward the door like they've just seen a raccoon in the kitchen. And the word everyone keeps repeating is war. Constitutional war. Branch versus branch, checks and balances cage match, referee missing, everybody brought a chair. Because the accusation is that Judge Caldwell crossed a line, not just any line. One of those invisible lines that everyone agrees exists until someone steps over it and suddenly everyone's pointing and yelling, "Hey, that line!" From one side, the argument goes like this. You cannot jail a protected witness right before testimony, seal everything, and then shrug like you just spilled coffee. That's not justice. That's sabotage. From the other side, the argument is, judges have discretion, classified information is real, and maybe, just maybe, not everything is a conspiracy designed to ruin your favorite podcast. And this is where it gets messy, because once you're in, maybe both things can be true territory, social media immediately declares that unacceptable. You're either Team Judge or Team JD, and if you hesitate for more than 3 seconds, congratulations. You've been accused of destroying democracy. What makes this story irresistible is that it hits every American nerve at once. Judges versus politicians. Secrecy versus transparency. The idea that there's a witness who knows something so explosive they had to be silenced, which, by the way, is always how movies start right before someone dramatically whispers, "They're coming." Then there's the tone. People aren't calmly discussing procedure. They're using words like overreach, tyranny, authoritarian, and banana republic, which is impressive considering most of them couldn't point to an actual banana republic on a map. And somewhere in the middle of all this, Vance is being portrayed either as the last man standing between democracy and judicial chaos, or as a guy who really needs to step away from the secure phone and drink some water. And let's talk about the judge for a second, because judges are usually the quiet characters in the story. They're the ones in robes, speaking slowly, making everyone else sit down. When a judge becomes the headline, something has already gone very wrong. Either the judge is wildly out of line, or the political temperature is so high that even a normal ruling looks like an act of war. Supporters of Judge Caldwell say this is exactly what courts are supposed to do. make unpopular decisions, protect sensitive information, and ignore political pressure. They'll tell you that if politicians start screaming every time a judge rules against them, the entire system collapses. They'll remind you that judges aren't elected, precisely so they don't have to care about who's mad on cable news tonight. Supporters of Vance, meanwhile, are saying, no, this isn't about being mad you lost a ruling. This is about a judge allegedly using secrecy as a weapon, cutting off testimony that could expose uncomfortable truths. And if that's the case, then staying quiet isn't restraint, it's surrender. And then there's the audio, or the idea of the audio. Because here's the funny thing. Half the people arguing about it haven't heard it. Some of them aren't even sure it exists. But that doesn't matter. In modern politics, the concept of leaked audio is sometimes more powerful than the audio itself. It becomes a Rorschach test. You hear what you want to hear. If you already think Vance is reckless, you imagine him shouting like he's auditioning for a villain role. If you already think the judiciary is out of control, you imagine him sounding like George Washington angrily reading the Constitution. Meanwhile, Washington does what Washington always does in moments like this. Leaks more. Anonymous briefings. Carefully worded statements. Someone tells a reporter, "This is unprecedented," which in D.C. is code for, "I've seen this before, but this time it's happening to my team." Emergency meetings get mentioned. Security concerns get floated. Everyone starts acting like they're one dramatic string score away from a Netflix trailer, and the public is left watching, trying to figure out what's real. Is this actually a historic confrontation between branches of government, or is it a story being inflated because judge quietly makes controversial ruling, doesn't get clicks? Is Witness 14 a central figure in some massive scandal, or just the latest anonymous label we'll forget about in 2 weeks when the next crisis drops? Here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody screaming online wants to hear. Constitutional crises don't usually announce themselves with leaked audio and dramatic quotes. They creep. They hide in footnotes. They happen slowly, through norms eroding, not through one guy yelling into a phone. But that doesn't mean moments like this don't matter. They do, because how leaders react when they think the system is being abused tells you a lot about how they'd behave if they had even more power. If Vance is right, and a judge really did cross a line to stop damaging testimony, that's serious. That deserves scrutiny, investigation, and yes, accountability. If Judge Caldwell is right, and he acted to protect classified information in a volatile environment, then political retaliation is just as dangerous. The problem is, both sides are absolutely convinced they're defending democracy, and history shows that's when things get ugly. So here we are. Half the country yelling, "Finally, someone's fighting back." The other half yelling, "This is how democracies die," and everyone refreshing their feed waiting for the next leak, the next clip, the next dramatic quote. And somewhere in all this, the actual facts are moving at the speed of the legal system, which is to say, much slower than outrage. In the end, this story isn't really about J.D. Vance or Judge Caldwell or Witness 14. It's about trust. Trust in courts. Trust in politicians. Trust that when someone says national security, it's not just a magic spell to shut everyone up. And trust that when someone says war, they're not just trying to win the news cycle. So yeah, buckle up. Because whether this fizzles into nothing or turns into something genuinely historic, it's a reminder of how fragile things feel right now. And if you're watching all this thinking, "This feels insane," congratulations. That's the correct response. If you want to keep up with how this unfolds, stick around, like, subscribe, do the algorithm thing. Because if there's one guarantee in American politics, it's this. If everyone's saying, "This changes everything," something else is already warming up in the bullpen.